As summer ends, leaves begin to fall and we note the passage of time. One Jewish year closes and another opens. We count our losses of the past year, noting new absences at the holiday table. And we remember people we have loved and lost over a lifetime, names and faces that live in our memories. As our new year begins, we do not know what will be, who will live and who will die, and when our time will come. Yet there is hope in the power of remembrance. If we remember, we too may be remembered. If we love, we too may be loved. We who are alive with blood in our veins, air in our lungs, and light in our eyes, we live for ourselves and for others.
The summer day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last, and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Over the last few days, I've been able to see my life as from a great altitude, as a sort of landscape, and with a deepening sense of the connection of all its parts. This does not mean I am finished with life. On the contrary, I feel intensely alive, and I want and hope in the time that remains to deepen my friendships, to say farewell to those I love, to write more, to travel if I have the strength, to achieve new levels of understanding and insight. This will involve audacity, clarity, and plain speaking, trying to straighten my accounts with the world. But there will be time, too, for some fun and even some silliness as well. There will be no one like us when we are gone, but then there is no one like anyone else ever. When people die, they cannot be replaced. They leave holes that cannot be filled, for it is the fate, the genetic and neural fate, of all human beings to be unique individuals, to find their own paths, to live their own lives, to die their own deaths. I cannot pretend I am without fear, but my predominant feeling is one of gratitude. I have loved and been loved. I have been given much, and I have given something in return. I have read and traveled and thought and written. Above all, I have been a sentient being, a thinking animal on this beautiful planet, and that, in itself, has been an enormous privilege and adventure.
Autumn speaks. Out of doors, the colors of bright autumn and the bright sun tell of the beauty of that which dies but always comes again. They speak directly to the heart of the eternal which outlives all moments and yet lives only in them. Outlives all forms, it comes again in them as in ourselves. It is said that there is nothing new in the world, no thoughts even, which others have not thought. Yet every thought is new to him who for himself thinks it for the first time. Each miracle of life is also rebirth, life born again, though every individual be new, existing from his birth for his first time. Life in each one, as in the leaf and flower, accepts and yet cheats death.
There's a sadness in the autumn leaf. I feel a sorrow that its beauty dies. And I feel its message for the lives of those, as of myself, whom I have never known and loved. The leaf comes not again, although other leaves and flowers will bloom, and other lives richer than have been shall take our place. Perhaps the autumn teaches us a wiser grace through which we live by learning to let go.
Enduring. Like awakening after a long illness, to find your health stole back in while you slept, your sorrow in its time will retreat, and the knowledge you carried all along will reemerge whole and cleansed. One day you will not thresh in the too bright light, looking for a corner in which to close your eyes. One morning the weight will not be there beneath your eyelids, the first thing you wake up to. It will not settle on your tongue like a lump of salt. And because you have stayed this long, unrelenting, in the unrelenting world, you know that time, though imperfect, is diligent and wrestles down grief, and that all things are born small and grow large, except grief, which is born large and grows small.
At times, devout members of religions that affirm an afterlife are tempted to say that the deceased is in a better place, living a better life in a better world. Or they are tempted to suggest that there must be some sin or error or judgment that has brought this fate upon the victim. Such persons cannot tolerate the thought that what has happened is unjustified, for it violates their principles of good and evil, reward and punishment. They need somehow to internally rationalize and justify a reality in order to bring the world back to proper equilibrium. The Jewish laws of bereavement, so exquisitely tuned to the needs of the mourners, stipulate that the Shiva visitor should not speak until the mourner speaks. I'd always thought that the point of that precept was to ensure that conversation would flow to the place the mourner needs to reach. But I now understand that the halakha enjoining the comforting visitor to hold back in silence serves a different function, to caution against offering a rationale for the decree of death. The deeper human religious response is to be silent, to live with the contradiction, and to affirm that we need not force meaning into tragedy. Sometimes the deepest response of love is to be silent.
The last word has not been spoken. The last sentence has not been written. The final verdict is not in. It is never too late to change my mind, my direction, to say no to the past and yes to the future, to offer remorse, to ask and give forgiveness. It is never too late to start over again, to feel again, to love again, to hope again.
It is never too late to alter my world, not by magic incantations or by manipulations of the cards or deciphering the stars, but by opening myself to curative forces buried within, to hidden energies, the powers in my interior self. In sickness and in dying, it is never too late. Living, I teach. Dying, I teach. How I face pain and fear, others observe me, children, adults, students of life and death. Learn from my bearing, my posture, my philosophy.
Be'anacht, a blessing. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colors, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken in you a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays in the currach of thought and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life.
After a while, you learn the subtle difference between holding a hand and chaining a soul. And you learn that love doesn't mean security. And you learn that kisses aren't contracts and presents weren't promises. And you begin to accept your defeats with your head up and your eyes open, with the grace of a woman or a man, not the grief of a child.
And you learn to build all your roads on today, because tomorrow's ground is not certain. And futures have a way of falling down in mid-flight. After a while, you learn that even sunshine burns if you ask too much. So you plant your own garden and decorate your own soul instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers. And that you are really strong, and that you really have worth. And you learn, and you learn, with every goodbye, you learn.
At this time, if you are comfortable standing, I invite you to stand for a memorial moment. As the day closes, Yom Kippur ends, the new year begins. Our thoughts turn back to the past, to the power of memory, and to our recent losses. With your service booklet, you received a memory book that includes the list of all the names that those in this community have chosen to remember in this season, no matter when the death occurred. It has become our tradition at Kol Hadash to share aloud the names of those losses of the last 2 or 3 years, because they are still fresh in our minds and still living in our hearts in a different way. In the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Proverbs, we read, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the memory of a good person is a blessing to us. I invite you to be seated, and as our instrumental proceeds, I encourage you to browse through this book to see the names of family and friends, simply the names of people who are remembered in this season. On page 11 in your service booklets, please read responsively together in the italicized text. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, together we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. What is the purpose of grief? If we believe in evolution, then human nature is a product of gradual change and survival advantages. Grief could have been a direct advantage for those who could mourn over those who could not. Or perhaps the ability to mourn was not a big advantage in itself, but grief was connected to other parts of our mental makeup that were. Grief could have been an accidental side effect. Evolutionary psychology is part art and part science, as was much of Freud's original psychology, to be honest. So in the spirit of rabbinic midrash, another art where multiple explanations can be true at the same time, grief could have come from many sources to evolve into the important part of our life it is today. Possible direct survival advantages of grief? Mourning enables us to let out the anger and the stress and the sadness that otherwise would build up within us and explode, endangering our relationships with living family and community, and thus our support network. Expressing grief can also leave us tired enough to sleep when we need to care for ourselves too. And grief inspires empathy from others, who are thus motivated to help support us when we are less able to support ourselves. Those shiva trays and meal trains are not just cultural, after all. Grief as a side effect of other essential features of our emotional life? Grief happens when we love, when we care for other people, when we are engaged in the well-being of our community. Grief results from our staying alive and maintaining relationships. Last year, I met a longtime Kol Hadash member for lunch, whose first wife's funeral I officiated over 15 years ago. I also married him to his second wife years later, and in general, for him, life is good. At this moment, he was grieving, having recently attended the funeral of one of his best and oldest friends. The longer he has lived, he has been able to experience grandchildren, great-grandchildren, the joys of life, but longer life has also meant attending more and more funerals for longtime friends and family. There is no easy answer to this challenge, this side effect, because a longer life will result in saying goodbye many times before we ourselves are the guest of honor. Unless we cut ourselves off, refuse to make new friends and new partnerships, unless we declare, I am a rock, I am an island that feels no pain and never cries, that would not be living our best life when we can live it. Our intention is to love and be loved and be loving. If this sometimes produces grief, it also produces joy. And over the course of our lives, the joy is worth it. However, sometimes the rhythm of joy and grief seems to tip too far to one side. All the tragedies of the past decade, I do not want to list them all, I do not need to list them all. This December will be 10 years since Sandy Hook, and think of all that has happened since then. We are on grief overload. Anger and sadness and loss have piled up until we don't know what to do anymore. I don't think we evolved to be able to handle this great a cascade of grief and pain. And so we have to be forgiving of ourselves. The usual cycle of grief and recovery, the old model of stages of grief, we need to prepare ourselves and be flexible enough to face something different. Some days will be overwhelming, others manageable. Sometimes we will be able to use our grief to better love our loved ones and to respond to our pain with action and advocacy. Some days the wave may get the better of us, and then we sleep, and the sun comes up, and another day begins with its own rhythms and possibilities. There are no easy answers to any grief, new grief or old grief, individual or collective grief, public or private grief. Grief is a part of any life that has love. It's a paradox, a circle. Grief might be the accidental result of a loving connection, yet grief can also be a reminder of the love we still feel for someone who is gone. If we can accept our grief as part of our best lives, then grief can be a source of love too. I conclude this message with a poem I find comforting, The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. The day fades, the year begins. The past 10 days have been a chance to change our course, to correct mistakes, to understand more about ourselves and our life. Asking deep questions of mortality, happiness, and meaning helps us to be better people. The more we become whom we want to be, the stronger our connections to other people will grow. We now prepare to enter the rest of the year. These next 50 weeks will offer new opportunities for introspection and self-correction, and the pattern we start today will help us as we move forward. Let us start well. Let us start here. Let us start together. The day fades, the year begins. On Rosh Hashanah, we call to the shofar, and the shofar calls to us. On Yom Kippur, we call to ourselves and we call to each other. The shofar's last blast has a lasting echo. It hangs in the air, fixing itself in our memory and reminding us of our promises and commitments. We will do justice. We will seek truth. We will be caring and honest and pursue our best selves. Those who hear the shofar call are committed to living better and being better. As we leave this place to enter the Jewish New Year, let us wish each other all that is good and sweet in life. Please say with me, on Yom Kippur we call to ourselves, on Yom Kippur we call to each other. Tekiah! Now our closing song on page 14, wishing each other peace, love, and joy. Peace be with you. I invite you to turn to the people next to you and wish them shalom, peace.